We've spoken a lot about this year's rising aggressive rhetoric, military movements and weapon development on the Korean Peninsula, but now we're going to look closer at how the Koreas have been spurred into an arms race of sorts by what's happening far from home. We're talking about the war in Ukraine, how it's facilitated their arms sales, giving both Koreas a chance to see their weapons in real action abroad and gain financially along the way. We'll come to South Korea's own arms trade activities and ambitions, but first, North Korea, against whom repeated claims have been made. It's no secret that North Korea's on Russia's side in what's been called its special military operation in Ukraine. Just days after it began nearly 2 years ago, North Korea was one of just 5 countries to vote against a UN resolution condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It was becoming obvious even back then that the North might seek to benefit from a conflict that was problematic for the United States and other nations aligned with American values. But perhaps even Pyongyang could not have dreamed how well things have gone with Russia, leading to North Korean leader Kim-Jong-un being shown Russian space technologies last September during a trip that included a summit with his counterpart Vladimir-Putin, and ultimately what the United States has called an unprecedented level of cooperation in the military sphere between the two sides that could drastically change the nature of the North Korean threat. We've repeatedly reported on independent satellite imagery detecting vessels being stacked with North Korean containers before heading off to Russia. The US, among others, has concluded that those containers have carried up to 1 million artillery shells and even dozens of North Korean ballistic missiles, very much in breach of UN Security Council resolutions. The US accused Russia of firing North Korean missiles at Ukrainian targets at the end of December and multiple times in January. We also have recent evidence of a handwritten Korean character on the wreckage of a ballistic missile documented in Ukraine on January 11th. We can list off the potential benefits of such arms trade for the North, though. They include access to Russian military hardware and technologies, financial gain by escaping trade isolation and using Moscow's status at the UN Security Council to shield it from further sanctions, and, as South Korea's pointed out, using Ukraine as a test site for North Korean missiles. That's especially relevant because they may be tested against Ukraine's US-supplied defenses. These benefits wouldn't have been possible without the war in Ukraine. Russia wouldn't have had nearly as much to gain from North Korean support. To put this in perspective, according to the New York Times this month, North Korea is believed to have been able to double the number of artillery shells it can fire per day to 10,000 since around 5,000 last summer, when Ukraine may have been able to reach parity or even achieved an upper hand in that regard, but is now thought to be seriously outmatched. And while the quality of North Korean artillery shells has been criticized, the sheer numbers still generate a threat, while North Korean ballistic missiles, even though they may not be as advanced as Russian systems, are still deadly enough to further Russia's war effort, and at the very least prolong the conflict while Ukraine's support network scrambles to raise further backing. Part of that network is South Korea, even if it has officially only offered non-lethal aid to Ukraine so far. The reality, as reported by the Washington Post, is that South Korea may have indirectly provided more 155mm artillery shells to Ukraine than all European countries combined last year. And in December, the US envoy to NATO insisted that South Korea's tremendous assistance through arms exports to Poland had helped NATO address the shortfalls that arose because of its support to Ukraine. In 2022, Seoul signed a series of deals to sell weapons systems to Poland, including K-2 main battle tanks, K-9 self-propelled howitzers, Chunmoo multiple rocket launchers, and F-A-50 light attack aircraft. even if that's indirectly linked to Ukraine, the conflict is helping South Korea as it seeks to achieve a 5% share of the global arms export market to become the world's fourth largest defense exporter by 2027. To give a sense of how much that would be worth, South Korea's arms exports in 2022 were worth a record-breaking $17.3 billion, according to the Defense Ministry. The influence of the war in Ukraine is stark when you consider that the figure rose more than $10 billion from a year earlier, and South Korea is expecting to set a new record of over $20 billion this year, again heavily fueled by demand in Europe as well as some other regions. Could Seoul go even further and directly supply Ukraine with weapons? That would disrupt a delicate balance because South Korea will want to protect what remains of its own relationship with Russia, particularly as Russian President Putin is not committing to a date to visit North Korea just yet. Moscow's also played an important role historically in helping to negotiate with the North. But considering that Russia has openly accused South Korea and its allies of preparing for war with North Korea and rising military cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang, Seoul could be pushed beyond its tipping point on Ukraine. Another interesting aspect of South Korea's involvement in this war is its intensification of efforts to be awarded reconstruction projects in Ukraine. But even in that area, North Korea's reportedly opened new offices in Russia to provide labor for rebuilding now Russian-occupied territories in Ukraine. But as we've seen, even if the North's been able to expose a Russia-shaped gap in global sanctions, and there's a resulting security shift in this region, South Korea's also been busy expanding its own reach, including in the area of arms trade.